Alright, so in my last video I showed you how I redesigned my YouTube thumbnails in Affinity Photo, but what if you don't have Affinity Photo? What if you don't have Photoshop? What if you don't know how to use Canva? I'm going to show you how you can make that same thumbnail right here in Davinci Resolve. Then we're going to take our image of the spine splitter, we're going to just add that here to a new timeline. I'm going to zoom in so I can see everything, and this is just a still picture. And then just like we did in Affinity, I'm going to flip that, I'm going to scoot it over to get it in position. And so to get that same fade effect, I'm going to come to our inspector, I'm going to come down here to cropping, and I'm going to up the softness. That's going to basically blend off the edges that we crop off. And so now I'm going to take this crop right, because even though it's the left side of the image, we flipped it, so it's still technically the right side that's being cropped. We're going to pull this crop right slider back, and we're going to fade that line. Bam. To right about there. I'm going to move this up from track 1 to track 2. I'm going to come over here to my generators, and I'm going to grab a solid color. I'm going to add that underneath, and I'm going to change this to white. So I have that same white background. I'm going to select that solid color, hold down Alt, and drag to make a copy. So now I have two, and then this one I can make whatever color I want. So we'll do that same kind of red color. I can come over here to settings. Under composite, I can change this blending mode to multiply. Okay, we're making progress. We're almost there. I'm going to make my timeline a little bit bigger because I don't need these audio tracks. Here's those same elements I grabbed off of 123 RF. So I'm going to grab that same halftone pattern. I'm going to unlink the transform properties. That way I can scale it up without scaling it horizontally. Same thing, come back to composite, change this to multiply. Okay, we're almost there. I'm going to grab the Backyard Wrestling History logo, shrink it down with our transform properties, scoot it over, throw it in the corner. And so what we're going to do is we're going to come over here to our effects, we're going to go to our open effects, and they have an effect called drop shadow. We're going to add that onto our logo here, and then we can increase the shadow strength. We can decrease the blur. We want a little blurry, but not crazy blurry. And then we can bring it right up against our logo, and bam! Now we can come in here and we can take the text box we are going to use. We're going to grab invert color. We're going to invert that. Come back to our video properties. Change our blending mode to multiply. We'll go ahead and rotate this. We'll scoot it over here to the side. I do still want to get rid of this blob, so I'm going to select that layer and I'm going to come over here to Fusion. Fusion is kind of like After Effects. This is where we're going to do all of our masking. Now, any effects we do on the edit page are not going to be reflected in Fusion, which is why it still looks inverted and rotated. Fusion can be kind of intimidating if you've never used it before. This is your image pipeline. Think of it as like a flowchart. Your media comes in from your timeline here, you do something to it, and then it goes back out to your timeline. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this ellipse mask. I'm not going to connect it to anything yet because I just want to like make sure I get this sized right. I'm going to size this, and if you hold down Control and scroll in on your mouse, you can zoom in and out. And then this little blue triangle, that's your mask input, so that's what we want. We want to take this ellipse, and we want to mask the media that's coming in from the timeline. Alright, now this is kind of doing the opposite of what we want. So I'm going to bring that soft edge down. Bring the border width down, and I'm just going to kind of fine tune this to make sure it's just the circle. But then I'm going to hit this invert button, and boom, now it's gone. Bam. And now if I come back to my edit page, look at that, it's gone. Now the only issue is if I try to resize this, if I unlink these X and Y parameters and I just try and stretch it horizontally, it's still stretching it based off of its original bounding box. And that's not what we want. We want to be able to stretch it horizontally. You could do all this in Fusion, and you could add, your transforms and your inverts and your blending modes and all that stuff right here in Fusion, but I'm trying to keep this simple. So what we can do is we can take this, right click, turn it into its own compound clip. And this is basically like putting this layer into its own container. So now when I stretch this, we're able to size it properly and correctly without it being affected by its original bounding box. We'll go ahead and we'll add our text. I can just use the regular basic title for this. Same thing, I'm just going to make a copy of this text, do the next line, make it the same red color as the background, and look at that, we're almost there. The only thing we have to do is cut this action out of the background. This is where it's going to get tricky. I'm not even going to lie. This is where it's going to get tricky. I'm going to take this spine splitter layer, I'm going to make a copy, I'm going to just use Alt and up on the keyboard to move it up to the top of my stack here and create a new layer. And so just like we did with that little orb, we're going to use Fusion to cut this out of the background. If you're using the studio version of Fusion, then you have the magic mask. And then you can come over here and draw strokes around what you don't want to keep. And you can fine tune this. But that's only in the paid version. But if you don't have the paid version, then you don't have the magic mask. So what you would have to do is you'd have to manually cut this out. And so you have a couple different options here. You have a polygon mask, you have a B-spline, you have a multi-poly. I forget what the difference between all these are because I don't really use them all that often. I'm just going to use polygon mask for this, but this is literally just you going around and tracing your image. Which is kind of tedious, kind of time consuming. We can add a little bit of a soft edge here. And then we'll just, again, run this into the mask input of our media in to cut it out. Come back to the edit page. Boom! And there we go. That's pretty much exactly what I made in Affinity Photo, and I did it right here in my video editor. And then all we got to do is come up here to File, Export, Current Frame as Still, and we can save this out and use it in our video. And then just like before in Affinity, if we want to, we can come to this solid color here, we can change this to whatever color we want, and we can change these colors to whatever we want and use this as a template going forward. And then the added bonus is, because this is a video editor, if you wanted, instead of still images, you could use video clips, and now you have an animated title card for your video. So there you go. Even if you don't have Photoshop or Affinity Photo and you don't want to learn Canva, guess what? You can still make YouTube thumbnails right here in your video editor.